Hello and welcome to the Youth Work Plus podcast. I'm your host, Becky Lawrence, and we are continuing our series of interviews today. And I'm joined by the Bishop of Oxford, Stephen Croft, today. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Really great to be here.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you here. I wonder if you could unpack for us, especially those who might not know, what your role is and what it entails.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the Bishop of Oxford, which is a large diocese in the centre of England. The diocese covers 3 counties of Oxfordshire, Berkshire and Buckinghamshire. It's an Anglican diocese and there are over 800 parish churches across the diocese and just under 300 church schools of different kinds and around 100 plus chaplains in different institutions. So my role is to oversee the whole and build and encourage the team of people who work across the whole diocese.
Great, amazing. And what's been your journey to here? How, why, and when did you get into ministry and your current role?
Thank you. So I grew up in Halifax in the north of England, so I'm not from these parts at all. And I became a Christian through my local church and local youth group when I was a teenager and felt called to ministry then. And then I was ordained into Anglican ministry in my 20s, spent quite a long time in parishes, not the longest bit in Halifax as well, in a kind of outer estate parish where my dad grew up and where my grandmother still lived. Then I've been involved in training clergy and in setting up and leading something called Fresh Expressions, which I know we'll go on to talk about. And then I was Bishop of Sheffield for 7 years before I came to Oxford nearly 10 years ago.
What kind of things do you have to do now as part of your role as Bishop of Oxford?
Every day is different. So on Sundays, I can be in different parishes all across this area. I'm focusing just at the moment on the city of Oxford, for which I have a particular responsibility. I spend some time every week or so in the House of Lords in London. So I was there yesterday and then in meetings with colleagues, in training events of different kinds, in one-to-ones or handling and being with people in pastoral situations. It's a wonderful mix and no 2 days are the same.
Yeah. Great, thank you. You're about to retire. I don't know whether that's a moot point to mention.
No, it's fine.
Or whether you're looking forward to it.
I think I phrase it like this. I'm about to stop being the Bishop of Oxford. So bishops have to retire when they get to a certain age, and I'll be nearly that age this year. So I'm not planning to stop working or cease ministry, but this role will come to an end in a few months' time. And I feel both sad to leave people that I love and close working relationships, but also looking forward to a new chapter, of course. And there are parts of the role, having done it for quite a long time, that I'm not sorry I won't have to do anymore.
You've been known to prioritise children and young people through your role as Bishop of Oxford. We'd love it if you could unpack a little bit about how and why you made youth and children a diocesan priority.
Yeah, thank you. It's a couple of things really. We may not be unusual, and I think every diocese ought to prioritise children and young people, absolutely, for their own sake in every age and generation, really. Children are important to Jesus manifestly, and so are young people. So it's a very obvious thing in the life of the church to prioritise children and young people. But we've done various things across my 10 years here, including pioneering developments in school chaplaincy and prayer exercises in schools, prayer stations and so on. But really during COVID, the COVID lockdown years, it emerged first that there was an acute need among children and young people through those years. And also, although the whole of the church's ministry suffered under COVID, work with children and young people suffered most and was slowest to come back. Many churches lost their children's and youth work almost completely. There were some heroic attempts to keep it going, but the lockdowns were so long and challenging for people that it was the slowest area to rebuild. So it became critical after COVID in listening across the whole diocese to say what everybody's saying actually is that this needs to be a priority for us. And that needs to give focus to our resourcing and our strategy. And every parish needs a plan of where they're going and how they're trying to build, and to be asking questions. The sense was that if we didn't do it now, the church will get into the habit of not having children and young people and accepting that as okay. And I don't think we're the church without children and young people. So those are some of the reasons. So some of the things we've done is to resource our team at the centre to try and listen to children and young people's voices as a diocese, so that actually we're doing ministry with children and young people and families, not to children and young people and families. We're fortunate because of the investments of the diocese that we have a development fund which parishes can apply for all kinds of things, but we've stipulated that at least 50% of the grants need to go in investment in children's, young people's and families' work. So often churches want to do something and just can't afford to employ a worker of some kind. We're making training much more widely available through the national initiatives the Church of England is taking. And we've also prioritised work with young adults through communities called Youthscape across the diocese. So we've got a great team working on it. It's encouraging to see how much is happening, but we're building back from quite a low base, so it will take a significant number of years to do that.
But really good to make it a priority for people.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah.
Oxford Diocesan values are courageous, compassionate and Christ-like. What do you think that looks like within work with young people?
I think each of them are important. So our vision as a diocese, which sets our values, is to be a more Christ-like church for the sake of God's world. So the church is meant to be like Jesus. And I think that's a vision which is energy and life-giving to people, more than a particular numerical target or anything that else that's measurable, really. It kind of takes us to the heart of what it is to be church. And then we unpack that in 3 words beginning with C, which are taken from the Beatitudes of Jesus in Matthew 5. The call to be contemplative, to be compassionate, and to be courageous. So I think the call to be contemplative is really important for young people. And I think young people deeply value the invitation to be contemplative and to learn how to pray and to be still and quiet. All our minds, particularly young people's, are very busy with exposure to technology, and contemplation and stillness becomes really important, as does depth. So that's been really significant. To be compassionate, most young people are intuitively compassionate for the world and for the climate and for the poor in the world, and living out the Christian faith in ways that embody that. This particular generation of young people, I think, who's lived through COVID, are also very sensitive to suffering and pain, perhaps more than the pre-COVID generations. And then courage is something that's become increasingly important also, I think, in living through and beyond the pandemic, because essentially the COVID lockdowns were a retreat into safe spaces, often with lots of isolation, and people have had to learn to re-engage with other people and with the wider community and with the world. And that does demand the virtue of courage. And I think discovering that courage is a deeply Christian virtue is really important in that journey. So because those 3 C's are all taken from the Beatitudes, which are for me a beautiful summary of the character of Jesus, and also a beautiful summary of what it means to be human and to live a fulfilling human life, I think they resonate very deeply.
Thank you. Really love that answer. You mentioned earlier that you oversaw the emergence of fresh expressions, which is now a very significant part of the Church of England. Can you unpack for us a little bit what fresh expressions is for people who don't know?
Sure.
And then second part of that question, what excited you the most about encouraging the church to find new ways of being church?
Thank you. Yeah, so the Fresh Expressions movement emerged over 20 years ago, which is probably before most of the young people that have businesses podcast are working with were even born. And a number of people, through listening to what was happening in the church, discerned that people were finding it harder to cross a widening cultural gap between where many churches are and the surrounding culture. And in that kind of position, the church has a choice to make. It can either accept that, except it can't if you read the Bible and the knowledge that the Christian faith is for everyone. Or you can shout louder and louder and hope that people will cross the gap. Or you can do what I think Jesus does, which is cross the gap to where people are and sit and listen to their concerns and try and grow new communities, Christian communities, in those spaces. So that was happening in gentle and small ways 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And the Church of England took the courageous decision to try and encourage it. I was involved in setting up and leading a team of people to do that. So it was a wonderfully privileged role because I got to travel all the country, meeting the people who were doing the most adventurous, courageous things in terms of context-based mission. It was inspiring, really, to do it. The most interesting thing I think about that journey was what Fresh Expressions did was give people a language to describe what they were already wanting to do and already doing. So it wasn't a kind of strategy that somebody in the centre of the Church of England thought, this is a really good idea, please could everybody do this. Everybody was already doing it, and the church, or trying to, or feeling they ought to, and the church gave a name and a language to that, which for me was a sign that this was a movement of God, not simply a bright idea. And that's been a blessing to a lot of people. I think there's been lessons along the way, and I think some of the new forms of church have been for a time and not as permanent as many of our parish churches. And I think Fresh Expressions have flourished best when they are in synergy with parish churches and part of their life, because the new initiatives will come and go and the parish church remains as a stable centre. Some, of course, are much stronger and have gone on in different ways.
What were some of those more creative ideas that you saw and thought, wow, this is really exciting and cutting edge?
One of the really interesting things was it was really difficult to communicate what this was all about by just talking about the theory of it. And the first thing we learned was that it was important to tell stories of what was happening.
Yeah.
And then the second thing we learned was the best way to tell those stories was actually to film people and to make little videos of what was there. So the first video we made included about 12 different things, and it included the first messy church, which has become quite normal since, but started in Portsmouth by Lucy Moore. It included something called the Bread Church in Liverpool, which formed around people getting together to bake bread once a week, midweek in a Methodist church. There was an enormous skateboarding park in Essex, which formed a worshipping community at the heart of it. There were so many really good things, and there was an unleashing of creativity and permission giving around all of that, which was extraordinary.
Amazing. I love all those really exciting ideas.
Yeah. The Church of England had not before identified the gifts that are needed in ministry in those contexts. So we coined a new language for that, of pioneer ministry, and it became possible to seek to be ordained with this as a particular focus of ministry, and lots of exciting training has developed to enable that. It was great, really, to be part of all that development.
Yeah. Quite a legacy to leave.
Yeah, well, there's lots of other people involved.
Yeah. A little bit of a curveball here. Let's talk about something different. But through your role at the House of Lords, you were a member of the Select Committee on Artificial Intelligence until 2020, and you're a founding board member for the Centre of Data Ethics and Innovation. AI obviously is really taking off at the moment, with especially the trend of creating little memes and cartoons of yourself and those kind of things, but also using it for all sorts of different things. I wonder if I can pick your brains a little bit on your thoughts on some of these things. What opportunities and dangers of AI do you think you see for work with young people?
For work with young people? I mean, I have to be honest, in terms of AI as a whole, there are lots of potential benefits for society, particularly in health and in some of the huge global challenges of climate change and so on. But in terms of work with young people and work in the church, I'm much more aware of the risks and dangers than I am of the benefits. So I think one of the powerful lessons, again, from the lockdowns and the pandemic, and as the church responds to all the technology now available, I think it's really, really, really important for the church to be as human as possible and to maximise person-to-person contact and encounter and meaning. And anything which is a substitute for that, it turns out to be a very poor substitute. We're talking now online, and that is better than not being able to talk, but it's nowhere near as good as meeting in the same room. And I think that's particularly true when people are forming relationships in community with young people. We need that person-to-person contact. I also think that there are so many risks for young people in exposure to technology and social media. One of the bills that I was involved in the House of Lords was the Online Safety Act, which has sought to regulate social media and keep people safer. It's already out of date, 2 years on, but that journey taught me very clearly just how challenging it is to be a young person today and to engage in social media, how exposure to addictive algorithms is really damaging to people's intellectual and social and spiritual development, and how parents and youth leaders and clergy need to be absolutely alert to the dangers and risks that people are living through. And as you will know, Becky, we've got really significant current debates going on in our society, and probably legislation this year, I think, on the effective banning of mobile phones, smartphones in schools, which there's more and more evidence to show that that's beneficial, and also on potentially really limiting social media for under 16s. There's real popular opinion building behind that. But I think for any young person now, and actually for any adult, the interaction with technology is such an important part of our lives that we need to resource one another in how we are digital disciples as well as disciples in the rest of our lives, and what kind of things we expose ourselves to be aware of all the stuff that's going on behind the algorithms as well. It's a huge area, and youth leaders in particular need to be equipped and be thinking about all of these things.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. You mentioned a little bit there about legislature and the law catching up with some of these new AI and digital ethics. What opportunities do you think are there for us as Christians and for the church to engage with some of those changes that need to happen to law with AI, and to champion online safety and digital ethics within the communities within which we work?
Yeah, I think the church is a vital conversation partner in all of that. So I've seen a real transformation in Parliament over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of MPs' awareness of these issues. So it was extremely difficult to strengthen the Online Safety Act when it was going through the House of Lords. There was a coalition of peers working with a group of then Labour opposition MPs to introduce a number of things which the government eventually accepted. But it was a real struggle to do that. But now the desire to ban mobile phones, to restrict social media for under 16s, to strengthen the Online Safety Act, the pressure is coming from MPs actually, as well as peers. And I think that's because of a rising public awareness, because MPs are finding their postbags are full, or parents are meeting with them who've experienced tragedy in their families because of exposure to social media, in part. So there's much greater awareness, and I absolutely think the church should be raising its voice, and that young people have a huge amount to say. Not every young person under 16 would support a social media ban for under 16s, of course. There'll be different views, but I do think that the majority of under 16s, in all the research that's been done, do recognise that not everything that comes out of a mobile phone is good, and that the addictive habits that phones are designed to develop do take so much away from somebody's teenage years, really. I've just read a brilliant new book by Jonathan Haidt. He's an American sociologist who wrote a very good book last year called The Anxious Generation, which is the kind of big book about the risks of phones. And he's just produced a book called The Amazing Generation with another author, which is actually written for teenagers to help them see the risks and dangers of technology, which I would really commend it.
I think I find as well with AI, there's quite a lot of people who see it as quite a harmless thing and aren't very well informed of the other side of AI, how much energy it uses to produce an AI image and to use AI and that kind of thing. Are there any insights or wisdom that you would offer on that?
Yeah, well, I think the technology companies keep the environmental cost of AI very much out of public view if they can. There are significant plans to build new data centres across particularly the south of England, and there's very little information available about their energy usage and especially their water usage. Water is a finite resource in the UK, and data centre users a very significant amount of energy. And I'd encourage any youth group and any group of young people to really dig into that locally, particularly if there are plans for something local. It's really striking in the context of this. Plans for the next few years is to give 16-year-olds the vote. So young people's voices are going to become, rightly, I think, more important in the political process. And that means, I think, that Christian youth groups have a really significant role in helping young people prepare to exercise their democratic voice and be good citizens.
Yeah, that's an excellent opportunity to mention, actually, isn't it? Yeah, how do we help them engage with all of that, with politics,
I
with
mean,
ethics, and
the young people who are now 13 or 14 are going to be the first generation to vote at 16, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. Changing track a little bit again, how has God-led move changed you along your ministry journey?
Well, yeah, lots really. I mean, if I'd tried to write the story from the beginning, I would have got it completely wrong. Every job I've done has changed me, and God has used to change me. The life experiences that have changed me have not been to do with my work so much as my family circumstance. So particularly the experience of I've been married, Anne and I have been married for 47 years now, which is a wonderful journey together. We have 4 adult children, we have 9 grandchildren so far, and every one of those relationships has been transformative, really, and a journey of discovery. I think probably the biggest change I've observed is the way you need to grow as God takes you into different situations. And there's a prayer in the ordinal when somebody's ordained where the bishop says to the candidates, pray daily that your heart may be enlarged. And I think the challenge as you go on in life, in your family and also in ministry and responsibility, is for God to give you a bigger and bigger heart. And also a heart to love the world, which needs so much love and care at the moment. So it's a kind of enlarging of mind and heart, I would say, has been the most significant transformation.
Yeah, and is that, would you say, the biggest lesson you've learned from ministry? Or
There's so many lessons for ministry, so I wouldn't want to restrict it for one. But given that the heart of the Christian faith is about loving God and loving people, the capacity to grow and have that have a bigger heart to do that is really important. But you also learn, and I've also learned so much from other people's experience of being with people in the most difficult and challenging times of their lives, and the way in which God is there even in the midst of the darkest times, really.
yeah. And have you got any particular ministry highlights or good news stories from throughout ministry?
Well, yeah. I mean, you probably haven't got long enough on the podcast for all of them. So, I think I'm really encouraged at the moment by 2 things particularly. One is I'm really encouraged by the number of stories I hear and the people I meet who are coming to faith from a background where they haven't been part of the church, often as young adults, often learning their faith, as it were, before they come to church because of so much stuff available online at the moment. But it's really good to see God at work in all of that, really. And I'm although there's been quite a lot of public wrestling and questioning with the Bible Society's research on quiet revival a year ago in terms of the scale, I'm hearing so many different stories and so many different churches that this is happening, that I do believe it's a significant change. And that's really, really encouraging, particularly for work with children and young people. There's a kind of openness to faith, really. And then the second area I'm really encouraged by is people who are offering for Christian ministry and their quality and gifts. And, the fact that God is calling so many outstanding people to offer in ministry, again, gives me real hope for the future.
Thank you. Yeah, great. We're a little bit over halfway done now, and it's your chance to ask me a question.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'd like to ask you what you think are the most significant trends in youth work at the moment, and what you think is happening across the church.
Yeah, I think I'd say I hear a mixed bag of stories. I think some people say, yeah, stuff's really happening and we're seeing this quiet revival thing and it's not quite so quiet. And then there are other people who aren't seeing much at all. But I think my thoughts behind it is that I think perhaps our perspective is that we've thought that God wasn't moving or that the seeds that were sown, not a lot was happening with them. And I think probably God's been doing more behind the scenes than we realised.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the reasons why it's being called the quiet revival is because it is kind of seeping in.
Yes.
And some people are seeing it and some people aren't. And I think that doesn't mean that it isn't happening everywhere. It's just that it's going to take a while, I think, for people to see it in action. I think also some of the amazing stories have been people stepping out in anticipation of something happening because they're hearing that young people are so open, and some people haven't quite been so bold or haven't quite got out of the comfort zone to do something different, to do something bold. And so I think, some of that, needs to come from us as individuals who are doing youth and children's work and think, okay, if there's something happening, how do we tap into it and where do we follow God's lead to get involved in this, and where is God already at work that we're missing?
No, that's good.
Trends, I think I'd say compared to a few years ago, there's definitely, I'd say, less paid youth and children's workers around than there used to be. I wouldn't say there's any less youth or children's work. I think there's just a lot more volunteers who are involved doing it now. Which I think makes the landscape slightly different, especially for a charity like ours who's trying to support leaders, whereas in the past it would have been, I think, easier to support people who were doing youth and children's ministry as their vocation because they'd be free during the day to come to things. Whereas now we're supporting much more volunteers who are doing it, who have other full-time jobs or other commitments. And so it's finding ways to support them in the best ways, to be able to still offer them, that connection and that support, and find new ways of doing that, I think, is the challenge.
Yeah. That's good.
But Stephen, what area of youth, kids, family ministry would you say you're the most passionate about, and why?
Okay. Well, I can I have two?
Yes, you may.
I'm really, really passionate about good under fives work.
Okay.
And that's something I've learned from Anne, my wife, who's been a serial starter of parent and toddler groups in every place we've lived. And I just see the value of that. And now I see it for my grandchildren and their parents. So I just think people need so much help when they first become parents. And I think it's a wonderful way for the church to engage. And the second area I'm most passionate about is small youth groups of just 2 or 3 people. So when I was 12 in my local church, somebody started a youth group for 3 12-year-olds, and they didn't have much idea what they were doing, but they did it, and it was the key to a whole generation of young people in that church coming to faith, including me, for which my whole life has been shaped from that, really, by the grace of God. So I think small ventures by volunteers are the bedrock of the church's ministry with children and young people, and the more they can be encouraged and equipped, the better. And alongside both of those, I mean, one of the hardest and most painful lessons that church has learned over the last 10 or 15 years is everything has to be undergirded by good safeguarding practice and a good safeguarding culture. And without that, we shouldn't be starting. That was three things, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. And we mentioned this a few minutes ago, but it'd be good to get your thoughts some more on it. What are your thoughts on what is being named the Quiet Revival? Are you seeing a shift in young people and young adults coming to faith and coming to churches, as the research suggests? What do you think? Is it the start of something bigger? And how can we, as churches and youth and children's leaders, engage in that?
Yeah, I think the evidence is there now in terms of the number of different stories of that happening. I think something significant is happening. I don't think it's making quite the difference that's been claimed by some of the research in terms of, certainly in the Church of England, in terms of a net reversal of decline overall. But we are seeing significant numbers of young people coming to faith and a greater openness to faith. I think that's really, really good. I think it's probably part of a wider societal trend. I think it probably is the start of something significant, and that this trend is likely to continue for some time. It's partly to do with the way each generation grows further away from faith until you get to a point where it's more straightforward for a generation to come back. I think we're seeing that. It's partly to do with, as the original Bible Society research identified, with the fact that the world's in such a mess, and also people are aware of that. It's partly to do with the fact that people have lived through a pandemic and have been shaken out of complacency, and partly to do with the fact that when people start searching, there are a significant number of Christians with high profile, which leads people to say, okay, well, that might be a direction I can look in. So none of those factors is going to go away. They're only going to increase. So I would think it's happening. But I think what the church needs to be doing, curiously, is what the church ought to be doing anyway, even if we weren't hearing these stories, which is being confident in our faith, in the huge treasure of knowing Jesus for any age of person, and being committed and consistent in demonstrating the difference faith makes in terms of compassion for the world, and working for change, and teaching the faith with confidence as well. So whether or not people are responding, that's what the church ought to be doing. I think we should be encouraged by the stories that we hear, but I don't think our response should depend on it happening.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Why do you think it's important for churches to engage with children and young people? Have you got any wisdom on churches doing that well?
I think it's really important because Jesus does it, really, and Jesus engages with children and young people. So we should too. God loves children and young people, so why would we not? And I think any church which does not have children and young people in it should be discontented about that. One of the things that makes me tear my hair out is if I hear, usually secondhand, because people don't dare say it to the bishop, we're not the kind of church that has children and young people. And I just want to, scream and throw things, because every church, should try and to be welcoming, and to set aside time and space and priorities. So all of that's really important. And going back to something I was saying earlier, it's very important to do ministry with children and young people, not to them. So this isn't simply providing things for people to do, it's actually being community with. And some of the things that we're finding fruitful in the diocese include, rediscovering all age worship and patterns of fellowship, which includes children but not exclusively for children, can be really helpful.
Yeah, great, thank you. What can we pray for you as you're nearing your retirement? And
thank you, that's very kind.
What are you going to do next? I'm intrigued to know.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think I can answer the two questions together.
Yeah.
You can pray that I really hear from God about what to do next. So,
Mm.
I've been in this interesting position of not having to ask God the question, "What shall I do next?" for a good number of years, really. And I'm actually finding it quite energizing to pray that prayer, "Here I am, send me." I'm anticipating it'll be a few months before that becomes clear, and to know where I kind of place my energies in the next phase of life, really.
Yeah.
But also good to have prayers for good endings in the Oxford Diocese. So we've another 3 months or so of life and ministry here, which is great. And looking forward to enjoying that and enjoying all of the kind of last things that I'm called to do.
Yeah, I definitely pray for that for you. And I'm sure our listeners will as well. We've mentioned it many times, but you're about to retire. I'd love to know, if you had the chance, would you do anything differently?
That's a very interesting question. There's lots and lots of things, smaller decisions, where I look back and think, oh, I
Yeah.
messed up there, or took a wrong turning there, or would definitely do that, handle that situation differently.
Yeah.
So lots and lots of those things. But the kind of core decisions of life, by the grace of God and the ministry I've been called into, no, I'd do it all again, really. Which is a fantastic and surprising place to be, but I really would. It's been a huge privilege to be a bishop in this place and in Sheffield, the previous place. It was hugely exciting to do fresh expressions, and I loved being a vicar. So one of the things I'd say is to anybody at all, placing your trust in God and seeking God's call on your life is the most exciting and interesting and fulfilling way to live this life. And if God calls you into Christian service of different kinds, that too is an immense privilege and immensely fulfilling.
Yeah. And last question for you is this: what advice or encouragement would you give to our youth kids leaders listening?
Well, I would say Jesus shows the way for us to be fully human and what human flourishing means, and to really look to Jesus and to get out the Gospels and read and think and dwell on that and really find out about what the Christian faith is about. To the leaders listening, I want to say thank you for all that you give to young people. I think it's amazing. It's one of the best places to invest your time and energy and your life. And by the grace of God, keep doing what you're doing and encourage the young people in their own discipleship of Jesus.
Love that. Short but very sweet. Love it. Thanks so much, Stephen, for coming on today to our podcast.
My pleasure, Becky. Yeah.
I feel like there's been lots of wisdom that we've gleaned from you today.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that lots of our listeners will have been inspired by some of the things that you've said. Wishing you all the best for your retirement that's upcoming, and
Thank
for you as you seek where God wants to put you next.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We are glad that you found our podcast today. Hope you found it inspiring and interesting. Obviously, if you have liked it, then press the like button. Subscribe so that you can find our podcast again. If you're a new listener, I'll see you and hope to find you on our next podcast. Thanks very much. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Becky.